These are the main developments this Easter Saturday. New South Wales Minister Don Harwin insists he did nothing wrong despite resigning after he's fined by police for breaking coronavirus travel restrictions. Queensland's new border permit system is now in place, meaning even residents need special authorisation to enter the state. Australians urged to continue staying home over Easter, with the nation now on the cusp of COVID-19 dying out.
The NRL under fire from the Deputy Chief Medical Officer for announcing it's to restart the rugby league season next month. Australia's richest woman, Gina Reinhardt, donates $6 million to the Royal Flying Doctor Service to fight the pandemic, while Britain records its deadliest day yet. 980 people killed in just 24 hours.
Now, globally, there are 1,650,000 coronavirus cases, with the death toll passing 100,000. This morning, there are 6,188 confirmed COVID-19 cases here in Australia. Our death toll stands at 55. In New South Wales, there are just over 2,800 known infections. Victoria, it's more than 1,200. Queensland has 964.
In Western Australia, there are 495 cases. In South Australia, 428 people have now tested positive. 111 cases have been confirmed in Tasmania. In the ACT, 99 cases, while in the Northern Territory, there are 28. Live now to our team of reporters covering the latest developments this morning. First to Serena and Aloro in Sydney. Serena, Minister Don Harwin, well, he's resigned, becoming the first high-profile casualty of these lockdown laws.
Yeah, he had little choice in the matter. Good morning, guys. The Premier told Don Harwin he needed to resign from his position as Arts Minister for the good of the government after he was busted at his Central Coast holiday home flouting his own government's non-essential travel restrictions. Now, in a statement, he maintains he didn't break the rules and he simply didn't want to become a distraction for the government. Now, meanwhile, in hotels across Sydney, 1,300 people who have returned from overseas will be finally let out after finishing their 14-day isolation. They'll be escorted out by police and by the army, but not before final temperature checks and respiratory checks too. But yesterday, New South Wales saw its first daily increase in more than a week in cases, 49 new cases, but we've seen 36 cases associated with the Ruby Princess.
Thank you. Now let's go to Amanda Abate, who is on the Gold Coast. Now, as Queensland tightens its borders even further, Amanda, these new restrictions came into force at midnight.
Good morning, Mon. Yes, that's right. It is getting more and more difficult to enter the state. Now, even Queensland residents will require a permit to cross the border here and return home. And anybody coming from a coronavirus hotspot will need to quarantine at home for 2 weeks. So we have already seen police here turn drivers away, even those with Queensland number plates, to go back and apply for one of those border passes. You can do that online, and you can still travel here for work or on compassionate grounds for medical appointments. Things like that are still allowed. What's not allowed are social visits, and in Queensland you can now be fined up to $13,000 for not complying with that. This is to try to stop people entering Queensland for an Easter holiday, and vice versa, to try to stop people from Queensland going over the border for an Easter holiday in New South Wales. Also, on our beaches, there has been a major crackdown, so you can now no longer visit the beach. There will be no Easter picnics at the beach. There's no sunbaking allowed. What you can do is exercise, but still, police will be patrolling those beaches. They will be using drones fitted with cameras and loudspeakers to keep an eye on crowds, make sure that crowds are not gathering. The same rules apply as well on beaches over the border. You can be fined $1,000 if you're caught there and you're not from the local area.
Olivia Leeming is in Canberra this morning. Olivia, really optimistic, but there are some early claims that Australia could even be on the cusp of slowing this coronavirus.
Yeah, that's the language that the Deputy Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly has used, that Australia could be on the cusp of slowing the virus to the point that it dies out, but emphasising we are certainly not at that stage yet, that it could take several weeks or months. At this point, for every Australian infected, they are still spreading the virus to at least one or two other people. So urging Australians to remain vigilant. He's also expressed concern over the risk of the NRL returning too soon, warning that bringing the game back in late May could be far too early, given how rapidly the virus can spread. It's something the NRL seems very keen for, though very much still up in the air at this stage. The federal government staying out of that fight at this point, but is under pressure to ensure that all Australians who are stranded overseas do return home as soon as possible. Hundreds who had been stuck in South America, they've been brought back on a flight from Peru, but we have been told of some individuals who do remain there, who have been unable to leave their hotel where they are still in quarantine, and also some private flights that have been organised out of India for some 1,300 Australians still there will start to leave from today, Matt.
All right, to Europe correspondent Sarah Greenhalgh in London now. Now, the UK experienced its deadliest day yet of the pandemic, but the country still hasn't reached its peak.
Good morning, Mon. Well, it's really hard to predict exactly when that will happen, but the UK's Chief Medical Officer says the number of deaths will continue to rise for at least the next 2 weeks after hospital admissions flatten out. But as you say, it has been the deadliest day, with 980 lives lost in the past 24 hours alone, bringing the UK's death toll close to 9,000.
We never forget that behind this number, behind each one is a name, a loss, and a family that'll never be the same again.
Boris Johnson is a step closer to returning home to his family. He's about to spend his second night on a ward after being moved out of intensive care. He's been in hospital, though, since last Sunday. Downing Street says he is now at least walking around in between resting to help his recovery. His dad, Stanley Johnson, did a radio interview today saying he believes his son's hospital admission, quote, served a purpose by making the rest of the country realise how serious the situation is. Across the continent, though, they are well aware. In France, they have had another horrific day, 987 lives lost there. The death toll is over 13,000 in Spain. It is almost 16,000, and in Italy, almost 19,000 people have now died as a result of COVID-19. Guys?
Extraordinary. Thank you, Sarah. And finally to US correspondent Paul Kadak in New York. Paul, another grim death toll has been recorded there, but finally some signs of hope.
Good morning, Matt. Yeah, it really is a matter of some good news wrapped up in some truly terrible news. The New York State Governor has says that he is cautiously optimistic that New York is at the peak or reaching the peak, given that the average rate of new hospitalisations has fallen again. And yesterday there were fewer people in intensive care than there were the day before, and that has happened. That's the first time that has happened since this crisis began. But even with signs of the infection rate slowing, he says this is far from over. The death toll again yesterday, we saw 777 people die just here in New York State. The death toll now sitting at more than 7,800. And with that many people dying each day, there's also been a rise in the number of unclaimed bodies, people who just haven't been claimed by any family or loved ones. So the city is once again turning to its graveyard of last resort, a place called Hart Island just off the Bronx. It's where unclaimed bodies have been buried for this city for 150 years, and we are seeing more and more of those burials in a mass grave there. They are plain caskets, but they are marked. If someone does come forward, those bodies can be claimed. So just a grim sign of the times. But there are also more uplifting signs. Across the country last night, at more than 100 landmarks, they were all lit up in blue. And that was to honour the efforts that are going on to fight COVID-19, to honour the frontline healthcare workers and essential workers doing what they can to save lives here in the US.
They're doing an incredible job. Thank you, Paul Kadak there in New York. Thank you, team.